Imagine ending the year on a note so terrifying, it haunts you for every new year to come. For some, the promise of fresh beginnings turns into a nightmare they'll never forget. From chilling encounters to unexplainable horrors, these true New Year's Eve stories will make you think twice before counting down to midnight. Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. Tonight we're diving into 3 disturbing, true New Year's Eve horror stories that will send shivers down your spine. As we bid farewell to the old year and embrace the new, some find themselves tangled in the unexpected and the terrifying. Let's jump into the darkness together. Story 1, The Midnight Visitor by Lila Hayes. My name is Lila Hayes, and last New Year's Eve, I learned that not all visitors are welcome, especially when they show up uninvited. I had planned a quiet night at home. My friends were out partying, but I was nursing a bad cold and opted for a cozy evening with movies and hot tea. My apartment, situated on the outskirts of town near a small patch of woods, was the perfect place to relax. Quiet, peaceful, and far from the noise of the city. The evening started uneventfully. I wrapped myself in a blanket, sipping chamomile tea while a cheesy romantic comedy played on the TV. The warm glow of the fairy lights strung around my living room gave the space a cozy, festive feel. Despite being alone, I didn't feel lonely. I thought it was the perfect way to end the year. Around 11 p.m., I was halfway through the movie when I heard a knock at the door. It was soft at first, almost hesitant. Startled, I paused the movie and sat up. I wasn't expecting anyone. My building had a secure entrance, and visitors had to buzz in. I approached the door cautiously and peered through the peephole. A man stood on the other side dressed in a black suit. His hair was slicked back, and he looked as though he had just come from a formal event. But something about him felt wrong. His face was unnervingly pale, and his expression was blank, almost detached. "Can I help you?" I called through the door, my voice trembling slightly. He didn't answer. Instead, he tilted his head, as if trying to see me through the peephole. The motion was unnervingly slow, almost robotic. "You have the wrong apartment," I said firmly, hoping he would leave. He knocked again, harder this time, and then spoke. His voice was low and raspy, barely above a whisper. "It's almost midnight. Let me in." My heart started to race. Something about his tone sent chills down my spine. I stepped back from the door, unsure of what to do. The knocking grew more insistent, almost frantic. Then he started pounding on the door, shouting, "Let me in! I just want to celebrate with you." His voice was louder now, filled with an eerie desperation. I grabbed my phone and dialed 911, explaining the situation to the operator as quickly as I could. The operator assured me that officers were on their way, but every second felt like an eternity. Meanwhile, the man's behavior became more erratic. He began scratching at the door, his nails scraping against the wood. The sound was unbearable, like nails on a chalkboard. "Go away!" I shouted, trying to sound braver than I felt. The scratching stopped abruptly. For a moment, there was silence. Then I heard a soft, chilling laugh, followed by the sound of footsteps retreating down the hallway. I stayed on the phone with the operator until the police arrived. When they did, I opened the door cautiously, my heart still pounding. The hallway was empty, but the officers found muddy footprints leading down the stairs and out into the woods behind the building. They searched the area but didn't find anyone. One of the officers suggested that it might have been someone intoxicated, wandering around after a party. But deep down, I knew it wasn't that simple. The next morning, I tried to put the incident behind me. I told myself it was over and that I was safe. But when I went to check my door, I noticed something that made my blood run cold. Scratched into the wood just below the peephole were the words, "Next time, let me in." To this day, I don't know who or what he was, but every New Year's Eve, I double-check my locks, close all the curtains, and pray that the midnight visitor never returns. Story 2, The Forgotten Party by Daniel Wren. My name is Daniel Wren, and New Year's Eve used to be my favorite night of the year. That changed 2 years ago when I found myself at a party that wasn't meant for the living. It all started with a last-minute invitation. My best friend Max and I had been trying to figure out what to do for the night. Most of our friends were either out of town or hosting small gatherings we weren't particularly interested in. Around 9 p.m., Max got a text from a number he didn't recognize. "Big party tonight at the old Calderon Estate. Open invite. Come ring in the new year. The Calderon Estate was a sprawling, abandoned mansion on the edge of town. Everyone in our area knew about it. It had been empty for decades, left to decay after the Calderon family mysteriously vanished in the 1970s. It was the kind of place that fueled urban legends and dares among teenagers. At first I was hesitant. "Who throws a party in an abandoned mansion?" I asked, eyeing Max skeptically. "That's what makes it cool," he replied with a grin. "Come on, it'll be fun. Besides, it's better than sitting around doing nothing." Against my better judgment, I agreed. By 10 p.m., we were on our way, driving through the winding, unlit roads that led to the estate. The night was cold and a thick fog clung to the ground, making the drive feel even more surreal. When we arrived, the mansion was lit up, its once crumbling facade bathed in a warm golden glow. Cars were parked haphazardly along the driveway, and the faint sound of music drifted through the air. It looked like a legitimate party, which eased my nerves a bit. Inside, the atmosphere was electric. The grand hall was filled with people, all dressed in vintage-style clothing that looked straight out of the 1920s. Jazz music played from an old gramophone in the corner, and the chandelier above sparkled as if it had been freshly polished. Max and I exchanged confused glances. "Did we miss a memo about the dress code?" he joked. A woman in a flapper dress approached us, her crimson lipstick and feathered headband perfectly complementing her outfit. "Welcome," she said cheerfully, handing us champagne flutes. "Make yourselves at home." Something about her smile unsettled me, but Max was already diving into the party, chatting with other guests and enjoying the drinks. I decided to follow his lead, trying to ignore the nagging feeling in the back of my mind. As the night went on, I couldn't shake the oddness of it all. The guests were lively and engaging, but their mannerisms felt dated. They spoke in an old-fashioned way, using phrases that sounded like they belonged in a history book. At one point, I excused myself to use the bathroom. Wandering through the mansion, I couldn't help but notice how pristine everything was. The floors gleamed, the wallpaper was vibrant, and the furniture looked untouched by time. It was as if the house had never been abandoned. That's when I saw it. A large frame photograph hanging in the hallway. It was a black and white image of a New Year's Eve party, dated December 31st, 1928. My heart skipped a beat as I recognized several of the faces in the photo, faces I had just seen at the party downstairs. Panic set in. I rushed back to find Max, but the crowd seemed thicker now, the music louder and more chaotic. It was as if the energy in the room had shifted. The cheerful atmosphere had turned oppressive, and the guests' smiles no longer seemed friendly. I finally found Max near the bar, laughing with a group of people. "We need to go," I whispered urgently, grabbing his arm. "What? Why?" he asked, clearly annoyed. "Just trust me," I insisted. Reluctantly, he followed me outside. The cold night air was a relief, but as we walked to the car, I noticed something chilling. The mansion, which had been glowing with life moments ago, was now dark and silent. The cars that had lined the driveway were gone, and the air was heavy with an eerie stillness. "Where did everyone go?" Max asked, his voice trembling. "I don't know," I replied, fumbling with my keys. As we drove away, I glanced in the rearview mirror. Standing in the doorway of the mansion was the woman in the flapper dress, her crimson lips curled into a smile. Her figure faded into the shadows as we rounded the bend. Later, I tried to research the Calderon Estate and the party from 1928. What I found confirmed my worst fears. That year, the Calderon family had hosted a grand New Year's Eve party, but a fire broke out just before midnight, killing everyone inside. The mansion had been abandoned ever since. To this day, Max refuses to talk about what happened. But every New Year's Eve, I think about that party and the guests who never left. I don't know why we were invited, but I do know one thing. I'll never step foot near the Calderon Estate again. Story 3, The Final Countdown by Olivia Grayson. My name is Olivia Grayson, and the events of last New Year's Eve are something I'll never forget. It started as a typical celebration, friends, fireworks, and the promise of a fresh start. But by the time the clock struck midnight, I found myself fighting for my life in an empty train station. My best friend Claire and I had planned a simple night. We'd spend the evening at her apartment with a few close friends, watch the ball drop on TV, and maybe go to a local bar afterward. Around 10 p.m., Claire's boyfriend suggested something different, a midnight train ride into the city to watch the fireworks from the park. It sounded spontaneous and fun, so we all agreed. We bundled up against the cold and walked to the station, laughing and joking along the way. The streets were alive with excitement, strangers shouting "Happy New Year" and kids playing with sparklers. When we arrived at the station, it was unusually quiet. The ticket counter was closed, and the few people waiting on the platform looked more like shadows in the dim lighting. Claire joked about how eerie it felt, but we brushed it off as the result of holiday staffing shortages. The train arrived a few minutes later, its headlights cutting through the foggy night. We boarded quickly, relieved to find an empty car where we could sit together. As the train pulled away, I noticed something odd. The station behind us disappeared into darkness much faster than it should have, as if swallowed by the night. At first, the ride was uneventful. We chatted, took selfies, and counted down the minutes until midnight. But about 10 minutes into the trip, the train jolted violently and the lights flickered. "Probably just old tracks," Claire's boyfriend said, trying to reassure us. But then the train stopped. Not at a station, not even near one, just in the middle of nowhere. The fog outside was so thick that we couldn't see anything beyond the windows. The conductor's voice crackled over the intercom. "Attention passengers, we're experiencing a delay due to technical difficulties. Please remain seated." We waited for what felt like forever, but no one came to explain further. Then I noticed something strange. The fog outside wasn't just hanging in the air. It was pressing against the windows, as if it had a life of its own. A faint tapping sound echoed through the car, coming from the far end. At first, we thought it was the wind or something outside, but the tapping grew louder, more insistent. "Who's there?" Claire called out, her voice trembling. No one answered, but the sound stopped. For a moment, everything was silent. Then the lights in the car flickered and went out completely, plunging us into darkness. That's when we heard it. Footsteps. Slow, deliberate, and coming closer. I fumbled for my phone and turned on the flashlight. The beam illuminated the empty aisle, but the footsteps continued, growing louder with each passing second. "Let's get out of here," Claire whispered, her grip on my arm tight. We made our way to the next car, but as soon as we entered, the door behind us slammed shut. The air was colder here, and the fog seemed to seep through the cracks, curling around our feet. Suddenly, a figure appeared at the far end of the car. It was tall and shrouded in shadow, its features obscured. It didn't move, just stood there, watching us. "Who are you?" I demanded, my voice shaking. The figure didn't respond. Instead, it raised an arm and pointed at the clock above the door. It was a countdown clock, ticking down to midnight. "Let's go back," Claire's boyfriend shouted. But when we turned to leave, the door was locked. The countdown continued, the seconds feeling like hours. The figure didn't move, but the fog grew thicker, swirling around us and muffling our screams. As the clock hit 0, a deafening noise filled the car, a mix of screeching metal and distorted laughter. The figure vanished, and the train jolted forward, throwing us to the floor. When we finally stopped, we found ourselves back at the station where we'd started. The platform was deserted, and the air was deathly still. The train doors opened, and we stumbled out, gasping for air. The train pulled away without a sound, disappearing into the fog. We looked at each other, trying to make sense of what had happened, but no one had an explanation. Later, we learned that no trains had been scheduled to run that route that night. To this day, I don't know where we went or who or what was on that train with us. But every New Year's Eve, I can't help but think about the countdown clock and the figure that pointed to it. Whatever it was, it felt like a warning, a reminder that not all endings lead to new beginnings. Thanks for watching. If you like this video, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more creepy stories. Which of these stories gave you a chilling experience? Let us know. Until next time, stay curious, stay safe, and remember, sometimes the scariest stories are the ones that are real.